My mother-in-law dyed and straightened my mixed daughter's hair, so I blasted her on social media. My mother-in-law never seemed thrilled about her son marrying a black woman, but I guess she has never been straight up nasty to me. However, every time I see her, she commits microaggressions against me. For example, the first time I ever met her, she touched my curly hair and said she liked my wild look. I was offended, and I asked her to please not to touch my hair. All she said was, "But you must be used to it since you're okay wearing your hair like this." And touched it again. My husband, who was still my boyfriend at the time, understood my concerns after I told him how it made me feel. He told me that he had a talk with his mom about respecting my personal space, and after that, we only saw her on special occasions since we had such a poor first impression. My husband and his mom were never super close growing up, so it wasn't an issue when we didn't see her regularly during our relationship. Yet the times where I did see his mom, like during the holidays, she would always manage to make a weird comment about my race or my hair. She made several passive-aggressive comments and once even asked me why I had never tried to tame my hair since I would be such a pretty girl if I had straight hair and that my natural hair was such a shame. It was honestly one of the rudest things anyone's ever said to me. On top of that, she said it in front of her entire family without any backlash. Anyway, my husband and I had our first child a year ago, and I almost completely cut off my mother-in-law for the way she acted at the hospital when she first met my daughter. My husband handed her our newborn baby, and the first thing she said was, "Well, let's hope you end up having pretty hair like Grandma." I kicked her out of the delivery room that day myself, and ever since then, our relationship has been especially strained. I only recently started trying to tolerate her more. Last week I allowed her to babysit our daughter since the very first time she was born. It has proved to be one of the harshest mistakes I've ever made in my life, and I will always regret trusting this woman with my child. My husband and I had been working extra hard recently, so we wanted to take a day trip, nothing overnight, since I didn't feel ready to leave my daughter for that long. He convinced me to leave my daughter in the care of his mom, even though I had a bad feeling about it in my stomach the entire time we were dropping her off. I would do anything to go back in time and listen to my instincts, and it still breaks my heart to think about the condition that we picked my daughter up in. When we get back to my mother-in-law's that night, my jaw dropped when I laid eyes on my daughter. First of all, her eyes were swollen like she had been crying all day, and I was shocked to see that her hair had been dyed and straightened. It looked awful, and my daughter was clearly upset. I immediately started ripping into my mother-in-law, asking what the hell she had done to my child. She just kept telling me to calm down and insisted this was a much cleaner look for my daughter. She said she had taken my daughter to a professional salon to get her hair dyed and keratin treated. She had dyed her hair a horrendous shade of platinum blonde, and the keratin didn't mix well at all with my daughter's hair and it left it with this crunchy wavy texture that felt atrocious. Apparently my daughter had been forced to sit in the hairdresser's chair for almost 4 hours even though she was only a toddler. My daughter was so exhausted and she just kept touching her hair and crying in my arms. I told my husband that I was never letting his mother-in-law take care of our baby ever again, and then I never wanted to see her for as long as I lived before storming out of her house. My husband didn't follow me out, instead, he stayed inside and spoke with his mother. I waited in the car for him, and he was silent the entire drive home. When we got home, I just spent the rest of the night comforting my daughter. My husband didn't bother us, and it honestly felt like he was ignoring me. He didn't even come to check on my daughter or comfort her before I put her to sleep. He just went to sleep early himself, and we still haven't spoken about everything that happened. I took photos of my daughter's hair so I could post on a curly hair group and ask for help on how to fix the damage that the hairdresser had caused. I was still fuming, and I provided the full story without my mother-in-law's name in the description of my post. The comments were full of people appalled by her behavior, but I received so many helpful tips, and I'm going to start repairing my baby's hair this week after I buy some products. Tomorrow afternoon when he gets home from work, I will sit him down and talk to him about how serious his mom's actions were and how I wouldn't tolerate this type of treatment from her anymore. It was one thing to have disrespected me for our entire marriage, but altering my daughter's body like this without even checking with her parents was another level of madness that I wouldn't stand for. My mother-in-law dyed and straightened my mixed daughter's hair, so I blasted her on social media. I am shaking as I type this. This situation has unfortunately revealed the truth about what kind of parent my husband is and his lack of backbone against his psychotic mother. After my husband got home the day after his mother had died and keratin treated our daughter's hair behind our backs, I sat him down to explain the seriousness of her mistake to him. First, I explained to him just how awfully she had damaged our daughter's hair. I tried explaining to him how curly hair works, but he just seemed kind of bored during this part of the conversation. I moved on to telling him about how violated I felt and that I didn't trust his mom around our daughter anymore. I said I was willing to compromise when I came to her seeing our daughter in person, but I would never feel comfortable leaving her alone with our baby ever again. My husband is usually such a patient and understanding man, but for the first time in our marriage, I watched him roll his eyes as I said the last part. I was getting increasingly annoyed at the way he was acting, and finally, I snapped and asked him if this was just one big joke to him. He told me to calm down and said that he honestly felt like I was overreacting and it was just hair. He said that he was sure that our daughter's hair could be fixed and that it didn't even look that bad in the first place. He even had the gall to tell me that the way I had flown off the handle yesterday at his mother's, and that it had been embarrassing for him. He said that he knows his mom went a little far yesterday, but she was still his mom and I needed to treat her with respect. I could not believe what I was hearing, and I felt like I was talking to a brick wall. Before I could even respond, my husband asked me if I had really posted about the situation on Facebook. When I explained to him I had posted in a curly hair group because I needed guidance on fixing my daughter's hair, he became even more upset. He said that the post had gotten back to my mother-in-law and that she had reached out to him saying I was trying to humiliate her online. He said that there was no reason to embarrass her like that, and that I was lucky that other family members of his who found out about the situation were supporting my mom, and it wasn't becoming a bigger mess. I wanted to cry as he spoke. He had never acted so callously towards me, and before he finished talking, he told me that he needed me to be a good wife and apologize to his mom so that he could be done with all this drama. I didn't answer him. I truly had no idea how even to begin unpacking what I had just been told. I just walked into our bedroom and cried myself to sleep. I feel so overwhelmed and blindsided by my husband's reaction. My daughter is only a year old, and I never expected to deal with such a devastating disconnection in my own marriage so early on in our life together. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'll apologize to my mother-in-law over my dead F-body. My racist mother-in-law died and straightened my mixed daughter's hair, so I blasted her on social media. When I left, I was explaining how my mother-in-law had died and straightened my 1-year-old daughter's hair behind my back while my husband and I were out one day. I was horrified and my heart was breaking for what my baby had been put through, and on top of everything it brought such an ugly side of my husband that I had never seen before. I yelled at my mother-in-law for what she had done and posted on a curly hair Facebook group about repair tips, and my husband indeed ended up getting upset at me for both things. I couldn't believe my daughter was going through this and I didn't even have the support of my husband. I was distant for a couple of days, but things blew up after I decided to take my daughter to the doctor to get her checked out. As I mentioned in my previous post, my mother-in-law had keratin treated my daughter's hair. From what I understood after researching it, it was a type of harsh chemical treatment to permanently straighten hair. After I learned this, I took my daughter in to get checked out since she was practically still a baby who had received an adult chemical treatment. I wanted to break down right there in the office when the doctor inspected my daughter and found mild chemical burns on her scalp. I thought things couldn't get worse, but he then explained to me that she would need antibiotics as well as a topical ointment, and it was in my daughter's best interest for her to get a short haircut so the ointment could reach her scalp more effectively. I was in tears, but I knew I needed to do what was best for my baby after she had been put through so much. I took her to get her hair cut very short after the doctor's, and when I got home that night I sat my husband down again and told her about my daughter's injuries, as well as my concerns about his lack of reaction. The conversation ended up turning unpleasant very quickly when my husband continued to defend his mom, even after I told him about our baby's burns. All he said was that his mom was old and just trying to bond with her granddaughter. I really started to lose it, and eventually, I started raising my voice asking my husband how he could be so careless towards his own family. He threw it back in my face and said that I was being careless to his family. Then he accidentally let it slip that his mom had actually asked him about treating my daughter's hair before we left that day and he neglected to tell me. He admitted that his mom mentioned dyeing and straightening my daughter's hair and my husband had told her to do whatever she wanted. He yelled at me and asked me how the F was he supposed to know what the hell keratin was. This was how I found out my daughter never went to a salon. My mother-in-law had done the keratin treatment at her house, so no wonder she had injured my daughter in the process. I broke down. I saw no solution or compromise in the conversation and it just felt like my husband was hell-bent on making me feel crazy. He simply refused to admit that he screwed up and it led to our child being physically harmed. I took my daughter to my parents' house that night and I've been here for a few days since the night of the fight. My husband has been texting me since I left. At first the messages were apologetic and he just kept pleading with me to come home. But then soon turned nasty and he kept accusing me of overreacting and acting out of line. He said I was the only one making issues and that my daughter's burns were already being treated and her hair was already gone, so there was no point in me still being angry. I'm broken. I can barely look at my daughter because I feel so hurt knowing how I let her down, and I don't see how I could repair my marriage after something like this.